One day we were sitting around the table drinking coffee with some friends, and we realized that the community we were looking for, we always found it when we had coffee.
So my wife and I set out on an adventure and a dream to supply fresh, locally roasted coffee with great quality customer service.
We worked together at the software company, and we would get off at 5 o'clock and go straight to our roaster and start roasting coffee and bagging. We realized we were really onto something. Everybody really liked the coffee. One time we literally stayed up 3 days straight, and I looked at Shay and I said, I cannot do this anymore. I can't physically, mentally, emotionally handle all the work and no sleep.
And that was the tipping point. Viridian Coffee is more than a beverage, more than a cup of coffee. It's a relationship. All of us form a community.
We had a lady come to us when we were working, and she just looked like she needed a hug. And we were standing there, and Shay just reached out and said, can I give you a hug? And she just started crying. I think Duncan was just primed and ready for a big hug. And so were we. The community reminded us why we were there and how important it was that we keep going through those difficult times.
And we knew that if we were going to put our life's work towards something, our effort, it should be something that we'd be proud to look back on and to be able to leave a legacy not only for ourselves and for Viridian, but our children.
Basically a place where you feel you're wanted and you're cared for.
We bring fresh, locally roasted coffee to all of our coffee houses, and we ship all across the United States. And we do that right here in Duncan, Oklahoma.
Hey guys, welcome to another Motion University live stream. We're super excited to have you back with us, and we got another interesting and hopefully exciting one for you guys here today. So we're diving into kind of behind the scenes of how to make a cinematic coffee promo. So just a little backstory first before we dive in of why we wanted to do this in the first place. So I feel like it's kind of a trend right now. Everybody and their brother's doing, whether it's a fitness commercial or a coffee promo or something like that. But so often they tend to be this overhyped, kind of like this vlogger style thing, which has its place for sure, but it's just really overdone. So we wanted to take a look. I feel like what Andrew has done with this promo is he's really made something that feels a little bit more mature, a bit more just actual like solid cinematic. And so we wanted to chat with him today and kind of get a little backstory of like how he got the client, diving into some of the thoughts and ideas of the pre-production, the production process, and the editing. So that's why we're excited to have him on today. So our guest today is Andrew Smith, and I'm going to read his bio here really quick. I'm going to read it so I don't get it wrong. But Andrew Smith has expertise and passion for visual storytelling as a cinematographer and camera operator. Andrew has worked on dozens of short films and several theatrically released features, as well as commercials and music videos. Recently, he's worked with brands such as Netflix, DreamWorks, Hasbro, and LEGO. So with that, welcome, Andrew. It's good to have you on the show.
It's good to be here.
Awesome, fantastic. So if you want to just give us a little intro to yourself, I know we read your bio, but maybe kind of how you got into doing film, just all those kind of things, as well as kind of a lead up to where you are today.
Yeah, so I have been doing film since I was middle school, really. I had my dad had a DV camera, and it was, just this crappy little tape camera that I would run around and shoot things with my brother. My brother Adam and I, we actually worked together on this project as well. So we're still making films all these years later. And I kind of got plugged into, even though I was homeschooled, I got plugged into the local high school. There was a video teacher there that really mentored me and gave me a lot of opportunities to kind of hone my craft a little more than what I was doing. At 16, I was making like wedding slideshows before Animoto and all these other online companies made that just, you upload your photos and it does it for you automatically. Well, I would take all those photos, scan them, before digital cameras. It makes me sound old, like, and then I would like put together a slideshow and I started doing that and making some money at it at like 16 years old. And that's when it first clicked for me that, hey, this could be a career move, that is something I enjoy. really owe a lot of my success today to that first teacher that I had that kind of gave me those first few opportunities that I was able to exercise a film career.
And so off the bio, you've also worked with, well, hey everybody, I'm John Klein, I'm also here, with like Netflix and Hasbro and Lego. I want to hear about Lego. Like, so how'd you go from slideshows to working with some of the larger names in the nation?
That is a great question. And, you know, I think it's Dave Ramsey that said, it took me 10 years to become an overnight success. I've been doing this for so long, like, over a decade, and eventually you start to get lucky with some of those bigger name clients. And it's funny because you might be doing the same quality level work for some no-name brand or music artist if you're doing videos or whatever it is, and then that thing is going to be what gets you one of the bigger clients. And so it's like, you just got to keep casting your net out there, and most of the time you're just going to get some small fish, but eventually you start getting some of these bigger names, and that's the thing that leads you to the next thing, and just kind of snowballs from there. So
well, I also have to
I don't
just say,
think
like,
there's any one answer to that question, really. I've been fortunate to be surrounded by some people like my friend Kyle Roberts, who's brought in a lot of these bigger national brands, and I would say that to anybody getting started is you kind of choose the community that you surround yourself with, and that is so important. Like you said, you got a Spielberg poster on your wall. Like without somebody like George Lucas, Spielberg wouldn't have reached the heights of success that he did, and vice versa. So you just got to have that community that propels you forward.
Right. Well, that's a really good point of having a team, having a community, people you can collaborate with, even if it's just sending projects for review, but having people to work with and not just one man banding it the entire way all the way through is really encouraging. And also, I think it's really crucial to long-term success. That would also be the case. There's a book, Real Artists Don't Starve, and they talk about artists throughout history and the unknown or little known, unrealized often facts about their life. And often one of them is the collective of creatives that they were in community with, and how integral that was to their success. That's a great point. I just have to say that I'm really interested in your project because I like coffee a lot, and so when you have filmmaking and coffee, it's just like the best of all worlds from my perspective.
Sure.
So I'm curious though, when in filmmaking, is there like more of a specific specialty or direct interest? What do you do most often in the filmmaking world?
I drink a lot of coffee. If I'm not holding the camera, I'm usually trying to get my next cup of Joe. So, no, I've always loved visual storytelling, and that can mean so many different things. But great movies are just something that's almost transcendent, right? You can't get that experience any other place, and so I wanted to be a part of that process, and I am a very visual person. That's how I learn best. I love watching videos on YouTube, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to do this podcast, is because I started because people shared their knowledge with me, and I think that's how we all kind of get better. And it's I would say that filmmaking is, it's such a broad spectrum of things that you can do, from art direction to DP work. And for me, the framing, the lighting, all of those things are what get my juices going. If I had to be like a first assistant director, I don't think I could do it. So it takes all kinds to make a great film, and you need all those pieces, from the director down to the lowest PA position. So they're all important.
So the visual imagery, director of photography, camera, anything in that department is kind of
Right.
your the
I
sweet spot.
also like to edit. I
Okay,
actually
nice.
started as an editor, and I would say I do less editing these days, but I would encourage anybody who wants to do cinematography or directing, especially, to do some editing and to edit your own projects for a while, because you can see what works and what doesn't. And as we'll get into with this project, I shot it, I edited it, I kind of co-directed it with my friend Reggie. So it was a collaborative process, but knowing that I'm shooting it and editing it, I know I have to be in that mindset ahead of time. So it helps you kind of get into scenes, get out of scenes, know if you have the content or not, and you're kind of like running a live edit in your head. And also running a switcher on a live show is also a great way to learn that. So
Yeah. So tell me more about how this project got started. Was this something where a friend brought you on, where you reached out to someone and pitched a project? Is this a spec project? Did the client reach out to you? How did this project happen?
That's a great question. So Shay Hayes has been a friend and acquaintance for a long time. My sister actually did he and his wife's wedding photos many years ago. So I've known him for a while, and I knew him before he started this coffee company, Viridian, and he I came back to town after the whole cerveza sickness happened. I won't say it on stream, so you guys won't get demonetized or anything. But kind of moved back home during that, and Shay had just kind of got this huge loring machine, as you see there, which is like a many thousands of dollars worth of coffee roasting machinery in his office. It's the biggest one in Oklahoma, as far as I know. And so they're doing some really cutting edge stuff. And so when I came back to town, he kind of gave me a tour of their facility, and I said, hey, I would love to do a promo video for you. And so we kind of started talking, and they're still a relatively young brand. They've only been going for a couple of years now. Well, I guess more than a few years, but they're still, trying to get out there, building new. They just put a new franchise up in Chickasha, and so this is a local brand. They're still relatively new, and that was a great part about going into this project, is they hadn't done a lot of video content outside of their live, like, Facebook media. So I wanted to kind of make something that was elevated above that level, to kind of showcase what they could do, and also show potentially other, maybe local smaller coffee shops that don't roast their own coffee, that they have this equipment. Because if you don't advertise that, then no one's going to know that you have this massive
Right.
ability, that superpower that you just have buried under a bushel.
Right.
So
Without getting into necessarily budget specifics, um, a lot of times people are asking, like, how do I get started? How do I make a project? How do I just reach out to someone? So if we could clarify, is this something that they put money out and hired you for, or did you offer to do this as like a kind of a spec project, or do it for free for them, just for experience or for fun, or whatever the reasons may be?
yeah, that's
Was it a
another
paid project or a free volunteer project?
So this was a kind of a spec project that we kind of did a trade in kind. So I was offering my services for a coffee product.
Gotcha.
So it's not like a direct monetary transaction.
Right.
With hopefully we do some more video content for them in the future. But mainly, my brother had just come home from living overseas in Australia, and Adam came back home. We were doing this project together, which was the Oklahoma First Robotics Convention. It's a high school competition that we do. We've done it for over 10 years now, and it's one of my earliest customers, and they had to cancel it because of the outbreak. And so he ended up getting stuck here because he couldn't fly back to Australia, and there's some some things going on. And then also my other friend who had flown out from California, Reggie, he also got stuck here. And so we're all in Duncan together. And I was like, hey, we should do this project. And we were getting ready to do this other project, but unfortunately, on day one of production, we kind of had the rug pulled out from under us, and we had to kind of pivot to do something else. And we knew we were going to be stuck in Duncan for a while, and so we were like, hey, let's do this project. And we did this, and we also shot a bunch of interviews with my dad, kind of telling his life story. And I had just gotten order. I had pre-ordered the light matte spectrums, and so I really wanted to kind of test those out, run them through their paces, and see what they could do. So that's one of the other reasons why I wanted to do it, is I wanted creative freedom, and I wanted to make something that was like a national level brand commercial right here in Duncan, because I don't think sometimes people realize, like, hey, this is possible right here, and you don't have to hire somebody from out of state to get the quality of. And these are the spectrums here. As you can see, they're full color. They have 4 different panels, so you can do a gradient shift, or you can do any color, which is, it's pretty amazing. And they're only about that thick, so they're really lightweight and pack a lot of punch. So
Cool. Yeah, I remember that. I think we were in communication at the time when everything went down in 2020, and we were talking about possibly working on a different project. And I remember you were working the robotics thing when everything shifted. And so I think there's another good point there of taking downtime, and in this case, a very indeterminate amount of downtime and a lot of uncertainty going forward, which is also not uncommon if you're freelancing or in filmmaking. That can happen. And to collaborate with some friends, take the skills, take the resources you have, and put them to work, and do something that can show the skills, or to even practice. I mean, every time you make a project, you're learning and growing. And I think that's a great example to folks of what to do when you don't know what to do.
Right.
Yeah.
That is a great point. And I think practice what you want to make more of. And so that is something that I wanted to do, because I've done, like I said, I've worked with Lego and some of these other toy companies, which is very high key stuff. And I wanted to do something that was low key and a lot more moody and dramatic. So, not that coffee is necessarily dramatic or moody, but I wanted to create something that had like that theme throughout, and so show people that I could do it, because it's very fun and interesting to me. I would say I lean into that stylistic approach a little more as I mature as a filmmaker, and so when you do more projects, you start to realize, this is my style, this is what I like. And I think sometimes you have to do that almost for yourself first. When we're working in these locations as well, they're still running their business, albeit through the drive-through, because they couldn't have their whole office space. And this was very early in the pandemic. Like, they hadn't had mask rules yet finalized. Who knows what was happening with that? But it was just one of those things that, like with these video portraits, I wanted those to kind of feel the space. The green is very much a part of their brand. I kind of wish I would have been able to showcase that more with kind of the art direction, but I wanted to keep it neutral, dark, and then the yellow was another thing too, where you can kind of see in Shay's. I don't know if you can show his interview, but we had a burlap sack over the window, and then I positioned a light mat behind it with kind of like a CTS or like straw look coming through that, so it looks like it's motivated from the window, and then kind of wrapped it around on one side of his face, and then a little bit of a edge light on the other side. And I have very little grip gear in my equipment, just not because I don't want it, but because I don't have enough space for it in my car. So at some point you say, either I'm going to be able to get there in like one vehicle, or I'm going to have a full 10-ton grip and electric package. So there is a point of diminishing return there as far as how much gear you can bring with you realistically as a smaller crew. Like, I mean, there's 3 people, and we kind of all have to work together to put up what little gear we do have. So the more gear, the more people you need to like kind of get things together realistically, so that your client's not sitting there for 4 hours trying to. And I appreciate their patience for what time it did take us to kind of set up and shape things.
It's good. One thing I want to highlight back is when finding a project or a client, there's something unique about this coffee shop. They had something that they instinctively saw or had an interest in letting other people know about, in a way that's maybe different than a lot of coffee shops would be. So anytime you're looking for a client, you're looking for someone to reach out to, finding that unique factor that benefits them beyond just a video to go on their social media or whatever, although there's benefit there, finding that unique factor can be a lot more helpful in them being willing to say yes to a project, because they more instinctively see that that benefit on their side. But I think you've done a great job with the visuals and that moodiness and the style of things. What's your pre-production process like? Are you a mood board guy? Or are you a show up and feel it out and see what happens kind of guy? What's your pre-production process normally like, or more specifically was like on this project and planning?
I would say it's a combination of things, but I'm very intuitive when I show up on set. Like, I know for this project or for certain projects, you're not going to be able to, with a working coffee shop, you're not going to be able to like art direct or like change a lot of things in order to make it look exactly how you want it to. And so a lot of what I do on location is, when I walk into a space, I'm saying, what is this space's best angle? And I think that's a really important tool to always be thinking about, because even if you're walking into a set where it's completely built for you, like I just worked on the movie Reagan. It's like a biopic with Dennis Quaid last year, and they built an entire White House set, and it's just incredible when you walk onto one of those bigger sets or a bigger movie. And but you also have to consider what is the best look for this space. And as a DP, it's your responsibility. That falls on your shoulders of how do you want to frame this space. And I think it's a really great tool for life, is like everything is about your perspective on something. So you can be, you can take energy from that, or it can take energy from you. And so you can walk in and be like, blank walls, like how can I make this look good? Or you'd be like, oh, this would be great to like run some lights through and make it like colorful, or and so like having a problem solving attitude is so important. And I think that's what's exciting to me about it. I actually enjoy that part of the process. So as long as I have the tools to achieve that. There are times where you feel like you have one hand tied behind your back and you're like, okay, here it is, whatever. We don't have the time or the tools to like make it everything it could be, but we're just going to do the best with what we have. And so that's definitely part of the process.
I think it's such a good point, because as I've
as far as other pre-production notes go,
yeah,
like one thing that was also unique about this about Viridian Coffee is that there was he gave us a lot of freedom. Shay gave us so much freedom, and I mean, it's also a huge responsibility to tell their story kind of for them. And both he and his wife put their whole lives into building this company, and I you don't take that lightly when somebody says, hey, we want you to tell our story and also like encapsulate several years of our lives into one like short 2-minute video. And so for me, that's like a tremendous responsibility and an honor to be able to do that. And when you don't have any sort of, I guess I would call it brand weight, or like something that's set in stone, where you're shooting something for McDonald's or whoever, you're gonna have like an entire, or Lego or whoever, you have an entire like list of guidelines that you have to follow to make sure you maintain the integrity of their brand. When it's a new thing, you kind of get to decide and change what those rules are for a company. So that can also be like a bit of a trap too, because you might walk in there with one concept of what that is, and then if you're not correct, then you're gonna make something that they're not gonna be proud of or want to show off. And so I would say it's kind of a double-edged sword sometimes, that freedom. But it, if you are caring, and you do your research about who that person is and what they want to portray, I think it can be something that both of you are proud of. And that's always a really tough thing with creatives in general, is like, you have one idea or vision of what it should be, and I wanted to, I want it to be bright and completely opposite from what you decided you wanted it to look like. So I think as long as you set your expectations up front and are clear about those things, that's super important.
Yeah. I think, just jumping in really quick, I wanted to highlight one of the points, because I think it's such a good point, of where you're saying of like making sure you know what you're coming at it with, and then as promotional filmmakers or doing that kind of thing, it's really our mission is to serve them and to serve their brand. And so I think you made a really good point of like distinguishing between what is it just me wanting to do it for my portfolio, and what's actually kind of digging into, okay, what is their brand actually, maybe having a brighter, look is actually, once
Right.
you actually kind of get over the, okay, that wasn't what I was thinking of doing, and you look at it and you're like, okay, it makes sense for their audience or their particular way of doing things, or their brand is that kind of way. Then I love also what you said of like kind of digging into how do you help be like a partner in their mission as a company, in a sense, where it's like when you kind of get into their shoes and see it from their perspective, then you can be like, oh, I can see how this could be. And then you can infuse your creativity even into their ideas. So it's not just like, I want to do it moody, and they're like, we want to do it bright, and she's like, fine, I'll just do it bright, and then you just shut your brain off and don't care anymore. It's like, no, you can take that creativity that you have, infuse it into their ideas, and just elevate their ideas, and then they're super happy because they got what they wanted, but elevated to a new level too. So yeah,
Right.
I think that's really cool.
Well, and that's a great point as well, because when I heard Shay and Lindsay's story, there's so many things. I think we interviewed them for like 4 or 5 hours between the two of them, and so when you condense all that storytelling into 2 minutes, there's a lot of things that we had to cut that were super interesting. Like they had an adoption that was kind of a tumultuous time in their life, and there's just so many other pieces, and you have to decide as a filmmaker what is most critical for this audience to understand about this company. And ultimately, that's a story of triumph and of community and their coffee and how all those things interconnect. And hopefully we show that in the final product. But you never know when you're going into something. Sometimes you're doing that editing in your head, but it can take weeks sometimes to be able to figure out what that story is. And we sent them a couple different versions. We were able to actually get to the final fairly quickly, but then there's so many other things that we talked about that didn't make the cut in the final. But I think one of the most important things is what Seth Godin said: good taste is knowing what your audience wants 5 minutes before they do. And I think that is, as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, you should always think of where do you want, what goal are you trying to achieve with each video that you make? Are you trying to inform them? Are you trying to entertain them? Are you trying to make them feel a certain way or an emotion? And everything from that point should be to further that one goal. So, and then you're going to be you're going to have a much more engaged audience.
Which then means you have a happier client because the audience is liking the video or the product and paying attention and moving on. And yeah, I think as artists, that's a huge point, that it's not about what we want to make necessarily, or even necessarily in some ways, even the client's ideas. You want to collaborate together to then figure out what the audience needs and wants to hear and see, and make that focus. I 100% agree. Tell us more about the filming part of it. I mean, I know you specialize in the visuals and directing photography. Is there anything, you mentioned a few things, like the burlap sacks. I noticed in some of the footage and pictures, there's more burlap sacks over windows. Is there anything specific that you want to call, any moments that you want to highlight or talk a little bit more that was either a fun challenge or a kind of a creative thing, or just that you were really excited with how the setup turned out, and just kind of highlight some more? We'll have other DPs and some of the tech nerd guys, watching the stream as well. Talk about some of the projects from some of those perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I wanted to go into this project, just in the back of my head, was there's so much texture in this, in the just in the brand and these spaces. I kind of want to show that off. There's lots of polished steel that was adding a lot of like ping. Sometimes it was a little annoying to deal with because your lights are, bouncing right off of it into your camera, and you're like, that's super distracting. So I need to tone that down or pan things off. Or there's also this giant window in this setup in this is their Lawton. So if you visit Viridian and Lawton, there's just basically it's like a strip mall, and there's just an entire wall of windows. And so we were able to, sometimes we put like a furniture pad in front of one of the windows just to block off walls with like C-clamps. And so you have to get creative sometimes. If you don't have a lot of grip gear, you might just have black sheets or whatever, and then position people in ways that the light is most flattering on them. I also wanted to create some depth here. In their warehouse, it's kind of a little cramped, so I was like, how do we use that to our advantage? And so, there's pallets of coffee beans on the floor, and so you have to kind of maneuver your lights around that and be able to, as you can see on the side here, there's between us and the kind of the desk there's all these burlap sacks, and you see in the final shot there that some of the burlap sacks are cutting the light, which is kind of a happy accident, because we just put it high enough that it would cut off on some of the luring machine in the background, so you can kind of see the cut in the final shot there. But just using the environment to your advantage whenever you can is so important. And also, just the burlap sacks add a ton of texture. That's why we put it on the back window there, so it breaks up that without having to be like this massive blown out window in the background. And that was one of the things that they kind of already had on set, and we just kind of maneuvered things to our advantage there. And this shot in particular, this is Shade Bean, which is his real name. He's their like head coffee roaster there. We did an interview with him as well, and so this was when we were first setting up. He was helping us out and showing us how the machines worked, and we shot a bunch of B-roll with him. But I noticed that it was a little too hot with him, because we had the light a little bit closer to him, and he was also in front of the sign there. And so, it's just one of those things that you have to make iterations in the moment, as quickly as possible to find out what's going to be the best blocking. How can I most efficiently tell this story? Because generally, you want people as far away from the wall so you can create depth as possible. But in this case, just the way that it turned out, it worked out better that we moved everything forward and then put them behind the sign there. So it's just one of those things that you have to decide those things as quickly as possible so that you can get your continuity in post. Because if you decide you want to shoot it one way, I actually was moving the camera around in between questions. So I had my friend Reggie who was asking questions, and I was running the camera and listening to audio. And I had questions that I would feed him sometimes, but I ended up moving the camera over, and there's another shot where it didn't go in the final edit because I thought of it way too late, but it's actually right behind him, and I was shooting past him towards the window, and it's more of a profile shot on him. And so it's just one of those things I wish I had thought of sooner. But unless you are able to kind of walk around the space, and also not think about the story as much, because when you have too many things going through your head at the same time, it can be a little overwhelming. Even though I've been doing this a long time, sometimes getting back into those shoes after you're kind of shaking off the rust a little bit, and then you're just like, oh man, I wish I would have grabbed that angle sooner, then I could use it more. But at the end of the day, they were really happy with what we came up with, and it looks pretty good in my opinion. So
How much of the cinematography is natural light versus units, fixtures, lights that you put up?
Great question. So I think probably 85% of our light is our units, and then I would say, yeah, the other, and it depends, because on the Lawton location where we shot Lindsay's interview, that was way more natural light. And so even though we did have a bunch of units, it's such a big space that it does make it, like in the warehouse with the machine, that we were able to control the lighting a lot more. There's obviously natural light coming in from behind the burlap sack there. We actually have a glass door right behind where I took this photo. So like when you enter the building, there's two glass doors that we ended up just blacking out because it was just making everything way too flat. So, but we did end up opening up part of that just to get a little bit of fill, because it ended up being way too dark on the shadow side. So sometimes you just use those things to your advantage, and sometimes you're like, oh, okay, that's a little too dark. Need a little lift in those shadows, otherwise we're just gonna crush it. So but I would say, yeah, if you can walk into a location, know where the sun's going to be at any given time is so important, because, and also if it's going to be cloudy or overcast, that can make a huge difference as well. I like to use apps on my phone to figure out where the sun's going to be at a certain time. Lumos is the app that I use. There's other ones out there, but I did one shoot for Hasbro. We were doing two different commercials on the same day for some of their web content, and we were using an Airbnb to shoot at. And so on one side of the house, we shot in a living room and did an entire morning there with one product, and then by that time the sun was on the other side, creeping in to where the light was shining through, and then we switched to the other side and set up for a kitchen scene. So it's just really important that you have those timings critically important, because if you miss that by even like 30 minutes or an hour, it can really bite you. So
that's awesome. We have a couple of questions coming in, so I just want to jump on those really quick while they're coming in. First of all, Christopher Lee was asking just kind of general question, just a clarification of what is it? How would you define a promo video? So obviously, different people call them different things. Some people will call it a industrial is a term I've heard, or a a promo film or a commercial. So maybe if one of you guys just want to kind of clarify, what does it mean? What do we mean when we say a promo film?
For me, a promo film is more like a lifestyle ad where you actually show people either using the product, or you talk about what it took to bring that product to market. So that I would say this kind of leans more into the latter, where you might have a great whiskey commercial for Jack Daniels where they talk about the whole history of their of how that product came into existence, or you talk about Apple where they do their highlight videos about how they design this product in such a way that there can never be any more finer curves on this iPhone. Well, this is the 50th one, so I hope you have it right by now, Apple. But I think that's the difference, is that the promos are usually a little more long form. An ad would be more of like a 30-second Super Bowl ad, all the way down to your local car dealership. So
Nice.
hopefully
Yeah,
that's a good answer.
yeah, no, that's super helpful, and I think it's helpful. So like, there's obviously the different kinds, kind of refer to different things. So in general, promo film meaning you're making a video advertising someone. So there's another category would be like branded content, where it's almost like you're making, say, like a short documentary or a short film or something that's sponsored by a certain brand. Then that would be considered that kind of type of thing. So there's a lot of different things, but in general, it's making a film for a client. Promo can be kind of a general catch-all, but I like how you kind of clarified, like commercial generally is kind of more of that like 30, 60 second, 15-second spot. Promo film or brand film is a thing that we call it a lot of times, when it's kind of just that general about video that goes on the website or on the Facebook page. So yeah, no, that's super helpful. Let's see, another question. I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce this right. Tezels. I'm not sure if you pronounce that name. On YouTube, at least, is the username. How do you go about getting a dark look but not being underexposed?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure how to answer it exactly, because sometimes I don't even know myself. No, I'm thinking like the main thing you want to do is look at your scopes and your histogram, so that once if that histogram is slammed all the way to the left side, you're probably doing something wrong, because you're never going to be able to lift those shadows up. On some cameras, we shot this on the Red Scarlet, which doesn't have great low light. Honestly, it's not a super great low light camera, but it does have like a really nice texture to the film, and so you're gonna have to throw a lot more light on the scene if you use a lower ISO, but you might get cleaner images. So I would say if you're wanting to shoot something that is low light, and you have to know the limitations of your camera, because if you're shooting on a Sony, you might be able to crank that sucker to like 164,000 and still get a pretty clean image. But it's knowing your equipment. Go out there, shoot some tests. I would say don't try something you've never done before when you're working with a customer, because if it doesn't work out, then it's kind of I wouldn't say it's the end of your career, but it might be the end of your relationship with that customer. So don't ask me how I know that, but actually, I have a story to tell about this. So when I was just starting out, it was like I was probably 18 at the time. I had just bought this camera. It was one of the first HDV cameras, which was these mini tapes. Actually, I brought this, and it was $700 when I bought it. It's this size. So imagine showing up to set with I was shooting for a local United Way campaign video with this, getting ready to shoot one of my promos, and they're like, who's this kid and why did we hire him? And and I couldn't tell him, but I was like, "You've seen my reel, you know what I can do." And I'm trying to prove myself because I don't have a long track record. And so one of the things about this camera is when you use a tape, you shouldn't reuse it. But I didn't realize that at the time, so I was reusing tapes, and I was shooting this promo video, and it ended up being like a 15-minute promo. But there was one tape that got corrupted because I reused it, and I had to import each clip 2 to 3 seconds at a time because I couldn't. It would continually stop every 2 to 3 seconds. So I was barely able to recover, and it was like I couldn't redo the shoots like ever. So this was a huge mistake that I had made, and fortunately in that case, they never knew about that problem. But I was like, I barely got by the skin of my teeth on that shoot. And so if you make a mistake, just make sure you don't make it again later, and you'll be doing golden. That's what I would say is feel free to make those mistakes, but try and make them on your own time and not not for somebody else. So.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Yeah, no, that's great. And great question. Thanks everybody for jumping in the comments. And if you guys have any other questions or things you want to jump in the discussion, feel free to drop those in the comments, and we'll get to those as we go along. One thing I wanted to touch on, Andrew, real quick, and kind of jumping back into shooting is one of the things that I feel like as I'm shooting sort of this style of thing, it's hard to know, especially when you said like they were an operating coffee shop, even though it was during the middle of the pandemic where they're not using the space physically, they're still having to fulfill drive-through orders and stuff like that. How do you go about, whether it's kind of coaching them on what you want them to do, or what's your process for getting the B-roll that you want? Because I know we kind of mentioned you kind of just more intuitive, just kind of figuring stuff out. What's your process when you show up? Did you have at least a little bit of a shot list that was kind of helping you know like what you wanted to do? Or yeah, how did you go about it? And then how did you go about coaching the talent, the on-screen talent, on what to do?
That kind of goes back to the mood boards. So when you're kind of looking up what aesthetic you want the overall piece to feel like or be like, I usually pick out. I watched a bunch of coffee ads, and I also was looking up images because I think sometimes ads and other things, they have a lot more time to light things when they're doing photos versus like video, because you can touch up things, you can make things look. Photoshop is a lot easier than trying to roto things by hand, and eventually we'll get there in video as well. AI is already helping that process along, but going into a project for B-roll, I would say, you always have your 5 shots. You start with your wide, medium, tight, and I would say try and shoot your B-roll the same way. So like you see shots of the low angle from past the coffee to shade, and then there's also the shot of him pouring the beans. As he's showing us how these machines work, he's doing the actual job of roasting these beans and talking about the process. So I'm shooting the screen that he's, punching these numbers into. I ultimately went for the more organic look. So even though there's this giant hulking, machine, I wanted to kind of create that handcrafted appeal to it. So you see kind of the action of everything turning, like you see the circle of the beans as they slowly get roasted, and then the process of bagging, we shot a little bit of that as well, and then him pouring the beans. I wish I would have gotten more shots of like the extraction process of the actual coffee being made. That's one thing that on the day, like we got some of these shots of like the fancier the like frappuccino kind of whipped cream shots, and the more like frou-frou stuff. I wish I would have gotten a little more of like the coffee extraction process itself, like she's tamping the coffee here. And I would say that's the only thing that I kind of missed as far as on the day you're shooting things, you're getting all these, and I wanted to create like the video portraits of the employees, because as they both talked about the community aspect of their company. People were the most important thing to one of the most important elements of why they created the coffee shop in the first place. So that was the reason for the video portraits, and when he says we wanted to create something that we were proud of, as well as something for our children, and because they had their children there, it was like, oh, this is brilliant. We're gonna shoot shots of their cute kids.
So did you shoot the interviews first, or how did that work? So like, did you have that then to go of like, oh, I know they're going to talk about the kids, or was that just something you're like, I want to make sure I have shots of their kids, if that makes sense?
Right. I think that is a great question. We shot Shay's interview actually about a week or so, maybe 2 weeks before we shot Lindsay's interview, and one of the things when we were in the edit, I was actually trying to make that work with just his interview, and later on, I was like, well, he talks a lot about the information about what happened, and that's just kind of his personality. And then Lindsay ended up bringing a lot more of the emotional aspect, where she talks about this story about this woman who just needed a hug, and so I was like, that is like the kind of the emotional hook that this story needed to feel complete. And so sometimes you don't know that until you get into the edit. I kind of had plans to shoot a second thing anyways, because just for the visual variety of being outside of just their warehouse, but we didn't do that until the second day of shooting that we did. So this a total of 2 days shooting, kind of like a full to half day on both of those shoot days, and then, like I said, probably roughly 5 to 6 hours of shooting after lighting and everything.
So another question that just came in was, how do you decide where to put your second camera during an interview?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I've done a lot of shooting on feature films as a B-roll or a B camera operator, and so that is a really great tool, because the DP is automatically gonna focus on the A camera, because that's what's gonna hit the movie most. But when you can be kind of second unit DP almost, by being able to pick your shots, how can you get because they're gonna have the first angle that's most interesting, but then your job is to kind of get creative with the second angle and to decide, okay, what is the best way, because sometimes you can go too far around, or you're going to get flat light on one side. There's going to be one side that's most flattering to the subject. There's going to be some angles that are too low or too high, and so how do you go into calculating all that? I think is a lot of just experience, for one thing, because I don't think there's any way that you can be like, here's how you do it every time. This is 100%. You can go into any situation. There are people that will tell you that, and I would say that most of the time they're wrong. I really think that there is kind of a science to it. You have to watch the lines in the frame. You have to pay attention to the lighting. Whenever it gets too flat, you're probably on the wrong side of the camera, on the wrong side of your A camera. And those are all things that I had to learn, like, as a B camera operator, because some of those things I just didn't realize until I was shooting a scene, and be like, oh, I really wish that I had put the camera over there instead of. And sometimes some DPs are really good about telling you exactly where they want you to be, but I feel like if you're a good operator, you can kind of offer a bunch of different solutions to enhance the storytelling in a scene or an interview.
So this has been really, really good. You've had a lot of great tips. I hope people that are watching this are like taking notes. There's a lot of great advice, even for other filmmakers and people getting started or trying to reach out to clients or setting things up and being creative in the space. Is there anything, Andrew, that we haven't covered? Is there any question that I should have asked that I didn't, or any other moment that kind of stands out to you that you wanted to mention or delve into that we haven't got to yet?
I'm trying to think. That's a good question. The storytelling aspect is always the number one on any project, with film. And if you have an idea of what you want to tell, and then I would say arguing is a little bit of an important skill, as well as persuasiveness, because like I said, you have to know what your customer wants 5 minutes before they do. And before they know, sometimes they're like dead set on one thing, and then you have to do a subtle, it's like a tightrope dance between arguing and being persuasive with them. And I'm not the best at that. I'll be the first to admit, because sometimes I'll say something, even with your director, like if you're not even the main person on set and you have to convince somebody that maybe their way of getting a shot or a scene could be done better. How can you do that without damaging someone's ego, or because there is, I think no one wants to be wrong, and thinking through a scene and also being humble about, hey, you could be wrong as well. And there's a gaffer that I've worked with a couple of times, Steve Mathis, and he's a Hollywood legend. And one of the lines that he says is, well, you could do it that way, but here's an idea, and he just offers it in that way. And it's a great way of just offering advice without beating down their idea, or elevating yourself up to like, hey, I could be wrong, but like, what do you think about this idea? And for me, I you could interpret that as like, you're an idiot, but here's a better way to do it. And I think that there's just so many ways to do that, and depending on your personality, some people are way better at it than others. And I think it's a skill that everybody in film as a collaborative medium should understand. And that's why one of the things that I loved about the team, even though there was just three of us, myself, Reggie, and Adam, we've worked together for so long that you need those people that will tell you when you're doing something that you're going to regret later in the edit, or maybe the ways that you're communicating that could be better, because there's always times where it's like a little tense on set, or you're trying to light something quickly and you're like, this isn't working, and you have problems to overcome on every set, and those never go away. But that's part of the adventure that you're all on together, and bringing people along that can help you be your best self is so critical.
Yes, back. We've brought it full circle. Now we're back to team again.
Yes.
And from start to finish, having a team, having collaborators, being able to grow to having other people with expertise that you don't have fill in those spots just elevates everything. And in the end, helps serve your client and your audience even better. Well, thanks for coming on. It's been great to hear more about the project, and the insights have been valuable. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of pretty stuff to look at, and to hear more behind the scenes of how that happened has been fantastic. For anyone watching, if you guys are interested in making projects or working with clients or refining your process for how you make projects, we do have an online coached promo film course that's actually starting in a couple of weeks. It's refilmed, revamped. Andrew Bartlett and myself are the instructors, and we have assignments. We review your work. We give you notes. It's very in-depth. We have live calls with everybody who's going to be on, and we've got a great class forming up for that. If you're interested in learning more about working with clients and making cinematic, promo, interview-based projects, you will make a project in this course, and we'd love to have you on board. Thank you again, Andrew Smith. Great work. Well done. And well, I guess we'll see everybody in the next video.
Oh, so I gotta unmute myself. That's helpful. Thanks again, Andrew, for coming on and taking your time, and I hope this was helpful. And thanks to you guys for jumping on in the comments and asking some questions. It's always great to hear from you. So if you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe, and we have more content like this coming up, along with a lot of other things. But yeah, thanks for your time, everyone. And with that, we'll go ahead and let you guys go. So have a good week.